our question today. What is the role of government, business and the public in reducing carbon emissions satisfactorily? What I'm going to do is break that question down into its 4 components. What is satisfactorily, and then what is the role of government, business and the public? I'm going to put the question to each of our panelists, and then I shall invite the first 3 questions or comments from the floor on each part. So please come forward with questions, but if your question isn't asked at that stage, then save them. The last 15 minutes of the session is all for questions. So to begin with, I'd like to ask the panel for a brief answer on what constitutes reducing carbon emissions satisfactorily in terms of targets and timeframes. Matt.
Okay, thanks. I think we're probably all going to be in roughly the same place on this one. Personally, I would sign up to the 90% reduction by 2050 and a pretty steep descent from now, because as we all know from the science, the longer we leave it, the harder it's going to be. So I won't hang about on this particular question because for me it's urgent and it's rapid and it's big.
So that's 90% reductions by 2050. Polly.
I'm quite hardcore about this. If you look at greenhouse gas emissions, the excess being a form of pollution, which of course it is. For instance, sound can be pollution if it becomes too noisy. So therefore, if we have an excess of greenhouse gas emissions, it's a pollution. Then what we must do is stop it. It actually has to stop. We have to stop the pollution. And for me, that means actually creating the relevant international legislative framework to prevent this from continuing. We actually have to make it illegal to pollute any further. Now, what does that mean? That actually means that 3/4 of the excess greenhouse gas emissions that we have are generated by fossil fuel. Well, that's actually only 300 corporations in the world. They tend to be fossil fuel. It's also concrete and some other industries. 300 corporations that you turn around and you say, okay, what you're doing now is illegal. We give you a transition time. You need to transition into, for fossil fuel, you need to transition into clean fuel. You're very good energy companies. We know you can do it. We know you can do it fast. So I actually come from far harder core positioning. I don't think we should wait till 2050 to go a slow descent. I say no. We actually give the transition time as just being a matter of years, and we turn around and we say it has to stop, and it has to stop very, very fast, so and it can be done.
What's your target and time frame?
I'm working on the basis that we can put in an international legislative framework within 4 years. The transition time is up for debate. It can be within 12 years.
And what target would that be in 12 years' time?
Basically, it's a different type of target. It's saying we no longer pollute. We stop utilizing polluting resources. So we stop, we move over to a clean economy, clean carbon economy, and we can do it very, very fast. It is possible. The figures have been done. We can actually move. For instance, with fossil fuel, we can move over. I've worked with Desert Tech Foundation. We can move very, very fast over into using clean fuel from the desert, from concentrating solar power plants. That can be done very fast. It's a matter of just gearing up those big corporations and those industries and making it happen.
Okay, so that's 0 emissions by 2021. Thank you, Polly.
Yeah.
Tom Druitt.
Unfortunately, I'm not an expert on what exactly is the target that we must aim for and in exactly what time frame. But I think that we should look at the best scientific research that has been done, and there has been a lot of it, and we should acknowledge that every report that comes out has a bleaker picture than the one a couple of years before it. So we should look at the most, the bleakest report, and then aim higher than that. And we should also make sure that we put in targets that are within the current government's term of office. Because it's no good saying that we're going to do this, that and the other before 2050, when all the politicians that have the power to bring in that change are not going to be around, or at least definitely not in power, when we're approaching 2050. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Alan, and if you are able to include in your answer something about short and long-term targets, if that's possible.
Yeah, I think sort of building on the sort of the sentiment from the panelists already, I mean the answer really has to be, the most satisfactory answer is 0 now. The real question is what is a realistic target? And I'm sort of on that area where some of the targets being negotiated, 80% by 2050, yeah, 90% would be fantastic, 20% by 2020, given where we were 5 or 6 years ago on this debate, is actually, you know, a very satisfactory negotiation position to be going to Copenhagen with. How you achieve that is far more important than the size of the number. And yeah, I agree with short-term targets, but not at the expense of long-term targets as well, because these are long-term infrastructure initiatives. I'm sure you've all watched with great interest the debate about nuclear. You know, that's very controversial. You know, nuclear is low carbon, but it opens other environmental concerns. That's a 10, 15-year building program. And a 20 or 30-year use program after that. You know, so we have to build in for the long term, as well as nailing accountability to the politicians short term as well. Not at the expense of that, but.
Thank you, Alan. So we've had 90% by 2050, 20% by 2020, and I would add to that my view, which is 4% reductions per year from now, which brings us to about 80% reductions by 2030. So can I have the first 3 comments or questions, if you could keep them brief, please?
I was really pleased to hear the view that we need to cut carbon emissions as pollution, just treat them as in excess, a poison that we can't live with any longer. I want to know, I haven't heard that view a lot, and I want to know how it's spreading and if other members of the panel think that we can get there.
So if other members of the panel think that we can get to cutting carbon dioxide as pollution to 0 emissions. Yeah, Matt, do you have an opinion on that, if it's possible to reach 0 emissions?
Everything is possible, and I think that as this debate progresses through, I think we'll understand what some of the barriers look like. Clearly there are immense hurdles ahead of us, and for me a lot of those are actually political rather than scientific or organisational or business. But so everything's the art of the possible, and I think we need to be very positive in our mindset about what we can achieve. And focus on those goals rather than you know, sort of drudging around some of the negative comments that are so often aimed at this transition. So you know, I would just say positive frame of mind is a good thing, and anything is possible, but there's some hellishly big barriers out there that we need to understand and start to break down.
Alan, do you have a comment? Is 0 emissions possible?
Well, no. Really, just because of the sheer scale of industry and commerce we have and the reliance we have. I think ultra low is possible, and ultra low should be an ambition, but I get very worried about this sort of absolute 0, because what do we mean by absolute 0? A herd of cows is really polluting. Do we make cows illegal? Yeah. Mixing cement is polluting. Yeah. Bonfires are polluting. Do we ban all bonfires? It's what do you mean by absolute 0? Yeah. Once we can define that and separate natural processes and the stuff we go about running our lives, running an event like this, then I'll go for it. But if we talk about 5 or 4%, it feels achievable.